Lord of the Rings is probably the most lore-filled and captivating series, and involves a lot of talking points and topics for debates which have left its fans intrigued even to this day. There are numerous topics that have been discussed over the years. Amongst them, the one question that has been asked numerous times is, why did the Fellowship not use the Great Eagles to fly straight to Mount Doom? Sounds simple enough. What's better than skipping the wastelands infested with orcs and all the drama and just go full air Middle-earth? If only it were that easy. Tighten your seatbelts. It's time we dive into the Middle-earth lore and find out exactly why the Great Eagles could not be used as giant flying Ubers. Please do like our video and subscribe to our channel for more of this geeky lore awesomeness. History. Firstly, let's get into the origin of the Great Eagles. During the First Age, the Great Eagles were actually the messengers and spies of Manwë. They possessed an amazing ability to see through all physical matter. The only thing that they could not see through were the blackness of Morgoth's evil pits. The first time when Morgoth discovered the limits of their sight was before the fall of the great stronghold of Utumno. For some time, Thorondor, who was the king of the Eagles, kept his eyries at the top Thangorodrim, the three mighty peaks that Morgoth had raised from the Iron Mountains above the gates of Angband. While they lived there, Thorondor helped Fingon rescue Maedhros from one of the sides of Thangorodrim. They later removed their eyries to Chryssagrim, which was a part of the Echoriad, encircling the secret location of Gondolin. They had a friendly relation with King Torgon, and also helped in keeping away the spies from the mountains. Immediately after Morgoth's duel with Fingolfin in the Dagor Bragolach, Thorondor wounded Morgoth in the face and carried Fingolfin's corpse to the Echoriad, where he was buried by Torgon. The Great Eagles also fought alongside the host of elves, the Valar and Edain, in the War of Wrath at the end of the First Age. They intervened decisively with Erendil in a fight with Ancalagon. In the Second Age, a pair of eagles had an eyrie in the king's house in Armanelos, which was the capital of Númenor, until the reign of Tar Ancalimon, when the kings became hostile to the Valar. The eagles also kept a watch on the peak of Mount Meneltama, and three eagles would always appear when someone climbed to the summit during the festivals of Erukierma, Eruhantale, and Erulaitale. Towards the end of Númenor, the Valar sent storm clouds in the shape of great eagles. This was an attempt to warn the Númenorians of their folly and impending punishment. In the Third Age, many great eagles lived at many eyries of the north, the most important one being called the Great Shelf, which was located to the east of the Misty Mountains in Wilderland. These eagles helped the elves of Rivendell and Radagast in watching the land and gathering news of orcs. The Lord of the Eagles at the time, along with a company of great eagles, rescued Gandalf the Grey, Thorin Oakenshield, and Bilbo Baggins, and 13 fellow dwarves from northern orcs and wargs, and brought them to the Great Shelf for a night and a day. Weeks later, a number of those eagles flew to Erebor and joined the Battle of Five Armies that had erupted. The eagles assisted in defeating the orcs and wargs. After this, the Lord of the Eagles became king of all birds. During the War of the Ring, Gwaihir rescued Gandalf from the top of Orthanc in Isengard, having been dispatched by Radagast. In the following year, from Ziraxigil high above Moria after Gandalf's duel with the Balrog. After Mordor's defeat in the Battle of the Pelennor Fields, the Eagles aided the host of King Elessar in the battle at Mordor's Black Gate. The Eagles arrived in time to overthrow some of the Nazgûl astride their black wings. Then Gwaihir, with others of his people such as Landroval, his brother, and Meneldur, rescued Frodo Baggins and Samwise Gamgee from Mount Doom nearby when the One Ring had been destroyed. Now that we have gone a bit over the history of the Great Eagles, let's get into the points as to why the Great Eagles were not used to just fly directly to Mount Doom. The narrative purpose, the journey matters. Tolkien's whole point was not just about going from point A to point B in the fastest way possible. It is about the whole journey. The whole Lord of the Rings series could be seen as a crash course in growth, pain, and seeing how you deal with situations when things get ugly. The endless trials and difficulties that Frodo had to face during his dangerous journey to Mount Doom were not just major inconveniences, but it is the heart of the whole story. Grabbing a couple of eagles and taking the express route route would have made the story to lose its charm. All the crazy stuff that Frodo, Sam, Gandalf, and the whole Fellowship had to go through, they were the building blocks for them in the process of becoming heroes. Throughout the series, not only can you see how power can get under your skin and rot you from the inside out, but also how friendships, loyalty, and a spark of hope refuse to fade away even when things get rough. Taking the Eagles might have cut out all of the struggles, but then we would have been left with a hollow shell of a story with no depth. The nature of the ring, the all-seeing eye of Sauron. The Eagles not being used was not just to increase the depth of the story, it was practically impossible as well. Sauron was not just a clueless villain who would be sitting in his tower and absolutely ignore the skies. Sauron's eye was basically the Middle-earth's most intense security camera. He was always scanning the skies for threats. The security of Mordor's airspace was probably tighter than airport security after a major scare. There was no chance for the Eagles to just fly in without being detected. Then there were the Nazgul. They were continuously patrolling the clouds on their fell beasts. If the Eagles had decided to fly in, the Nazgul would have been upon them in seconds, without any hesitation. After all this, there was the ground defense force as well. Ranks filled with archers, siege engines, and dark magic. The Eagles would have had absolutely no opportunity to escape once caught in that airspace. Flying into Mordor was not a shortcut. It was as deadly, or maybe even worse than the secret route that the Fellowship had actually decided to take. The Eagles might have been majestic, but even they were not immune to such a powerful defense force. The role and nature of the Great Eagles. The Great Eagles are ancient and noble creatures. They are not just mere taxis who would appear whenever called. They honestly have better things to do instead of playing chauffeur for wizards and hobbits and giving them lifts from one point to another. In this universe created by Tolkien, the Great Eagles are their own force and answering only to Manwë, the head of the Valar, and not to any wizard or mortal. Their appearances are very rare. Their appearances are not just some casual favors, but more like a sacred and divine intervention. When there seems to be no way out, hope arrives from the skies in the form of the Great Eagles. If they could summon the Eagles as and when required, that would cheapen the story. The Eagles were the last resort when all hope is lost and nothing was left to be tried. No one could include the Eagles in their plan beforehand. That would have just killed all the magic surrounding them. The Great Eagles were there to remind everyone that when all else fails, grace can still show up totally unplanned. Gandalf's strategy, secrecy, and stealth. Gandalf's main move during the whole War of the Ring was to stay off Sauron's radar. Even though Sauron had his eye watch almost everything, he was kind of blind in one aspect, which was his own arrogance. He just assumed that whosoever had possession of the ring would walk straight up to him and try to defeat him with it. Never did he even begin to imagine that someone would plan to just toss the ring into the volcano to destroy it and end the whole mess. Gandalf totally knew that the Hobbit Frodo had to move like a shadow and not a parade float. If he flew into Mordor on giant eagles, he would have been shot down almost instantly. The whole plan relied on Sauron being completely distracted by Aragorn and his crew, who were out there making noise and looking like a huge threat. Sauron was convinced that the ring was coming for him and not on its way to be destroyed. If anyone tried to go loud like trying to fly, it would completely shatter the whole illusion. The Eagles would have to be convinced that the task is worth the risk, and they are among the groups that are unlikely to understand just why the ring is so dangerous. Similar to Treeboard and Tom Bombadil, it is highly unlikely that the Eagles would risk the lives of many of their flock for a favor done to their king, which they had already repaid many times for something they consider to be a trifle. Gandalf had already thought about the defense mechanisms of Mordor, rightly planned to go in secretly and in a stealthy way. The corruption of the ring. The ring is not really picky about who it tries to take control over. Mortals obviously have no chance to resist the corruption, but even the big guns like Gandalf, Galadriel, and Elrond were very wary about the powers and the corruption capabilities of the ring. So even though the Eagles were majestical creatures, there was no guarantee that they would not start to get influenced by the ring. The ring just does not sit there idle. It always tries to worm its way into the head of the one in possession and tries to twist their thoughts and mess with their heads. The ring was created quite literally to dominate wills to control anyone who was foolish enough to carry it. It was a risk letting the Great Eagles carry the ring, because if they caved to the temptations of the ring, things would have gone bad to worse in a blink of an eye. It would have been a gambling with the fate of the whole Middle-earth if the Eagles were made to carry the ring. Tolkien's letters. Tolkien also has explicitly mentioned in his letters that he disliked artificial solutions, and especially ones that included an external savior coming in dramatically to solve the problem. The great eagles are one of the very few elements in his stories that come close to matching such sort of solution. This is one of the reasons as to why he rarely used the great eagles, only at times when there were no other options left. Tolkien always wanted his characters to do it the hard way. He wanted them to solve the problems on their own and earn victories through sheer courage, willpower, and resolve. If the eagles had been used as a pretty easy solution, it would have robbed the whole series of its emotional depth and philosophical core. When the eagles do appear, there are some key moments throughout the story when the great eagles actually do appear. When they rescue Gandalf from the pinnacle of Orthanc, when they assist in the Battle of the Black Gate and attack the Nazgul, providing crucial support, when they save Frodo and Sam from the slopes of Mount Doom after the ring is destroyed. Even though the great eagles have appeared in these key moments, we need to remember that these interventions happened when the characters had done everything in their power to achieve their goals and had no other option left but to rely on external help. The great eagles do not arrive just as a shortcut solution to a problem, but arrive to provide mercy. They are a symbol of hope and salvation, and not of strategy. Undermining the core themes of the story. The whole Lord of the Rings story is based on the theme of small conquering the mighty. The most powerful beings in Middle-earth cannot wield the ring without being corrupted. It is the hobbits, the least likely heroes, that bear upon their shoulders the fate of the world. The eagles, on the other hand, signify power. But in Tolkien's message, real victory does not come from sheer force and strength, but from humility, endurance, and compassion. Frodo and Sam's journey represents the quiet endurance of common folk. To skip over this journey essentially shatters the very thematic core of the story. Fan counterpoints. It is easy to sit back and just say that the great eagles could have just been used as a means of a surprise attack, or that they could have been protected by some sort of an invisibility spell, even if stealth spells were indeed cast upon the eagles, or if they somehow slipped down an entirely unnoticed and unrecorded route. Even then, surely the risk of failure was a vast one. All the corruption of the ring, the crown of the vigilant eye of Sauron, and the powers of strategy of Gandalf indicate that the chosen road was the only feasible one. The entire war was a diversion, conjured to draw the attention of Sauron away from Frodo. Any plan involving the eagles would have destroyed that fragile balance. Moreover, they could not escape the fundamental need for someone carrying the ring in the flesh. The entrance to the cracks of doom was not a wide and huge chasm. It required someone to walk right to the edge and cast the ring into the fire. The eagles, however large and mighty they may have been, could never carry through this final and fundamental step. Conclusion. At the end of the day, the question of why the eagles were not used to destroy the ring is not a plot hole, but rather marks the story's depth and intentionality. Thus, the eagles were never to be used as an easy solution. The whole story was never about finding the easiest ways out of problems. Tolkien created a world where the mightiest victories are earned through adversity, where the smallest people make the greatest differences, and where power is left unchecked. It ultimately leads to destruction. The eagles stand for hope at their core, emerging only when all is nearly lost, and never to be used as a shortcut. The long, troublesome journey of Frodo and Sam, with all its pitfalls and triumphs, despair and hope, is the very heartbeat of the Lord of the Rings. The eagles, however beautiful they may be, could never shoulder the burden of that story. So, to the next person who says, "Why didn't they just use the eagles?" Grin all you want and remember, because the eagles were never supposed to be a solution. They were supposed to remind us that even after stumbling through dark days, unexpected grace might still find us.